If the Golden Era and Wartime Era can partially be defined by their experimental nature, then the Silver Age of Disney full-feature animation should be seen as the era where Walt and his animators boiled their techniques and storytelling down to a formula. The Silver Age may be the era that is telling us Walt's personal story, values, interest, and struggles with his films, through the perspectives of the artists and creators he trusted. So, what types of stories were Disney animators handpicking to tell during this period in time? Well, we start with 1950s Cinderella. If you've previously watched our videos explaining Disney Animation's golden and wartime eras, then you'll know the ups and downs of financial struggle that the studio continuously faced. Because of this, it was crucial for the future of the company to have a financial success. Scripts for a Cinderella story were in the works as early as 1930, so the studio pushed forward with the film in hopes that it would mirror the success their previous princess story, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, had seen in 1937. Cinderella is a tale of a girl in trouble, an underdog, an unlikely hero who we are all rooting for to rise above the oppression. This type of protagonist eventually went on to define what we know as the classic Disney narrative. And isn't this also Walt's story? A story of belief and never giving up in yourself? A story that your dreams really can come true. The story of the American dream. After all, Walt had originally arrived in Hollywood with his ideas, only to have every door slammed in his face until he eventually went on to create his own empire. Cinderella feels like a story that is personal to those who created it, not only with Walt, but also with the infamous Nine Old Men, a group of Disney animators who worked with Walt since the beginning. During the Silver Age, and especially during Cinderella, the Nine Old Men really developed their own personal styles, bringing unique charm, character, and depth to the people, animals, and settings they were put in charge of animating. If you'd like to learn more about the Nine Old Men, check out the Disney Legends series we have here on Network 1901. This unique assignment of specific animated scenes to certain animators can almost be dissected and analyzed frame by frame in Cinderella. Walt used the Nine Old Men not only because of their creative ideas, but there was an atmosphere in the studio that allowed the animators to express their own feelings into the animations of these characters. Each animator's personalities brought uniqueness to the characters that elevated the art of the animation. With all of the care and love that went into this film, Disney's telling of the Cinderella story is the one that most people remember. Creating the definitive version of classic fairy tales eventually becomes a hallmark of the Disney Animation Studio. The Silver Age also became the time where Walt realized the importance in using expertly written music as a storytelling tool to move the story along. Walt discovered his previous film's music had appealed to the commercial market, and therefore creating songs to become Billboard hits became intentional. For Cinderella, Walt turned to the musicians of Tin Pan Alley in search of people who could write that next hit. There he found Mac David, Jerry Livingston, and Al Hoffman, who eventually led Cinderella to become nominated for Best Song and Score. After the struggles the studio faced during the wartime, Cinderella elevated Disney's credibility in movie making and solidified the notion that personal stories with fairy tale magic would be predominantly at the heart of a Disney animated film, including the next animated feature, Alice in Wonderland. Yet another film with many adaptations created before Walt got his hands on it, 1951's Alice in Wonderland became the next film in the Disney animated feature lineup. Inspired by Lewis Carroll's famous books, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, storyboard artists and animators realized that so much of the charm in Alice's adventures is found in the writing. Translating the iconic writing into film presented a challenge, but when Walt saw Mary Blair's artwork, he realized he could make the film. Keeping in tradition, this feature is created for a wide range of audiences, appealing to adults with puzzles and wordplay, while also piquing a child's curiosity with fantasy. 1951's Alice in Wonderland wasn't the first time Disney played with the Alice character. From his Alice comedies in the 1920s to the Mickey Through the Mirror cartoon short in 1936, Walt's decision to make the film harkens back to the first days of his career as an animator and could be thought of as a tribute to his roots. Alice in Wonderland utilized more music than any other of Disney's films to this point, but music wasn't the only tool used to elevate the storytelling. Live-action reference was also used in Disney animated films to understand not only how characters moved, but allowed animators to push characters further. Filming scenes in live action, first with the voice actors acting out the scenes, also led to some unexpected outcomes and directions for the story. In Alice in Wonderland, for example, the improv done by the Mad Hatter's voice actor Ed Wynn ended up being funnier than what was originally scripted, and the voice recording for that reference scene ended up being what was used in the final animation and dialogue of the film.
Oh, this is the very best butter! What are you talking about? Tea! Oh, I never thought of tea, of course! Tea! Sugar, 2 spoons, just 2 spoons, thank you, yes.
It seemed like Walt's animators could do no wrong when representing fantasy worlds that others could only dream of creating. So they went on to try their hand at another imagined world already dreamt up in the past by J.M. Barrie, At Home with the Darlings and Off to Neverland. Walt loved the story of Peter Pan ever since he saw the story performed on stage when he was just a child. Later in life, as a filmmaker, Walt recognized that the story of Peter Pan being told through the limited capabilities of stage and live action weren't true enough to portray the fantasy of childhood, which was the essence of the story. Animation, however, was limitless and could do what live action could not. Like Cinderella and Alice in Wonderland, the story for Peter Pan had been in development before World War II, but the financial burden the war put on the studio halted plans for the film. But with the success of the 2 films before it during this era, Peter Pan went into full production. The fantasy-filled worlds and magical colors of Mary Blair's art were utilized as concept art for the film. Walt's take on Peter Pan was different than ever before. It was the first time a boy was shown as Peter Pan. It was also the first time Tinkerbell was represented as more than just a spot of light, but rather as a person and full-fledged character with a personality and feelings. Much like the way Cinderella represented Walt's personal story in that dreams can come true, and Alice is a connection to his roots, Peter Pan is also a part of Walt's story. It places importance on keeping a youthful spirit, which is a strong, magical idea that essentially everyone can relate to. Taking a new direction with his next film, instead of reimagining a pre-existing story, Walt went with an original tale with Lady and the Tramp. The story of Lady and the Tramp started with animator Joe Grant in the late 1930s and was inspired by his own family dog. Joe Grant's original version started out with similar story elements we see in the final film today. A spaniel, antagonist cats, and a rat, and the storyline of the family dog being replaced by a baby. But it didn't include a tramp-like character, instead staying confined to Lady's indoor life. Walt saw the original story in storyboard form and rejected it, claiming that charm and loveliness does not a story make. Walt saw a comic in a magazine of a cynical dog and had the idea to pair the two to contrast Lady's charm and loveliness. But once again, World War II interrupted this. Eventually, Walt had Ward Green rewrite and novelize the story, changing it from Joe Grant's earlier version, and without ever giving Grant the credit he deserved. Instead, a story had circulated that the inspiration for the film came from Walt giving his wife a puppy in a hat box as a gift. This anecdote may still have happened, but the incident wasn't what sparked the idea for the story. Lady and the Tramp brought a complex, very adult storyline into a story that children could understand. It was a story of class, and 2 characters from different walks of life finding common ground despite what society was telling them otherwise. This is another film where the 9 old men were assigned different characters, being able to add in their own decisions and artistry and personalities to the characters they animated. The animated not only really represents how dogs act, but there's a richness to the characters that represents human traits, even becoming charming and relatable. Funny enough, during the production of Lady and the Tramp, Walt didn't trust that a scene of dogs eating spaghetti could represent falling in love, but Frank Thomas persisted through it, animating it on his own, and eventually convincing Walt it would work. Imagine where we'd be today without this scene. The setting of Lady and the Tramp is a clear tribute to the town that inspired so much of what Walt did, Marceline, Missouri. Coming from the big city of Chicago, Walt's family moved to a farm in the middle of nowhere in 1906 when Walt was just 5 years old. He fell in love with Marceline. It's where he learned to paint, realized his love of railroads, gained a sense of community, and developed his values to be giving rather than to have a lot. Lady and the Tramp became a nostalgic view of what America should be. The film's setting is designed almost as a concept for the feeling that Walt wanted to achieve in building his Disneyland park in 1955. The first 4 films in Disney full-feature animation's Silver Age truly represent Walt's story on a personal level, which is a theme that continues with the last 4 films of the era. In the next Disney animation film era's video, we explore part 2 of the Silver Age. Make sure to subscribe to Network 1901 for more Disney analysis, and like this video if you learned something new. Leave us a comment below and let us know what your favorite film of the first half of the Silver Era is, and why. And let us know what other aspects of Disney you'd like to see us cover next. I'm Angie, and until next time, hurry back.